Sometimes the best things we inherit aren't things at all. They're the pieces of our parents we never got to know. Ryan had been scraping by for years when he spent his last $30 on an abandoned warehouse at a town auction. The old building sat at the edge of town, worn down and forgotten. He walked through the dusty space with just a flashlight, hoping it could become his repair shop and finally give him a fresh start. Then he opened a door in the back. What he found stopped him cold. A hidden workshop filled with inventions, drawings and tools, all belonging to his father, a man he barely remembered. Why was this here? What had his father been building all those years ago? Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from, and if this story touches you, subscribe. Tomorrow I have something special waiting for you. Ryan stood in the doorway of that back room, his flashlight beam cutting through decades of stillness. The dust hung thick in the air, dancing in the light like memories refusing to settle. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the light switch inside, half expecting it not to work. But when he flipped it, fluorescent bulbs flickered to life overhead, revealing a workspace that looked frozen in time. The workshop was perhaps 20 feet square, lined with sturdy workbenches that had been built with care. Tools hung in precise rows on pegboard walls, wrenches, screwdrivers, measuring instruments, all arranged with the kind of attention that spoke of a methodical mind. A drafting table stood in the corner, its surface still covered with yellowed papers held down by a coffee mug that had long since dried to dust at the bottom. But it was the name that held Ryan's attention. There, on a wooden sign above the main workbench, carved in simple block letters, Michael Thorne's Workshop, his father's name. His father, who had left when Ryan was 7 years old. His father, who had died 10 years ago in another state, or so his mother had told him. His father, who Ryan had spent most of his life trying not to think about. Ryan set his flashlight on the workbench and picked up one of the papers from the drafting table. It was a technical drawing, precise and detailed, showing what appeared to be some kind of filtration system. The signature at the bottom read, M. Thorne, 1998, 27 years ago. Ryan would have been just a child then. He moved deeper into the workshop, his boots leaving tracks in the dust. Every surface held something. Notebooks filled with calculations, sketches pinned to corkboards, prototype parts carefully labeled and stored in clear plastic bins. This wasn't the space of someone who had abandoned everything. This was the workshop of someone who had been building something important, something that mattered. Ryan's life hadn't been easy since his wife left 3 years ago. He'd been working odd jobs, fixing appliances, doing handyman work, whatever paid the bills. His daughter stayed with his sister most weekends while he scrambled to make rent on their small apartment across town. The stack of past due notices on his kitchen counter had grown thick enough to use as a coaster. That's why he'd been at the auction in the first place, desperate for any opportunity to change his circumstances. The warehouse auction had been held on a grey Saturday morning at the county courthouse steps. The auctioneer, a heavy-set man with a voice like gravel, had barely glanced at the property listing. Commercial building, as is condition, no warranties, no inspections. Let's start the bidding at $500. Silence. The small crowd of bargain hunters and property flippers had taken one look at the photographs. Crumbling exterior, broken windows, overgrown lot, and decided it wasn't worth the trouble. Ryan had studied those same photos the night before, sitting at his kitchen table with a beer and a calculator, trying to figure out if he could afford even $100. 400. The auctioneer tried. More silence. 200? Come on, folks. It's a building. 4 walls and a roof. Ryan's hand had gone up almost without his permission. $50. The auctioneer had looked at him with something between pity and amusement. $50. Do I hear 75? Nothing. Going once, going twice. 30. Ryan had said, his voice barely audible. Oh, that's all I've got. The auctioneer had paused, looking around at the dispersing crowd, then shrugged. Sold to the gentleman for $30. See the clerk for your paperwork. And just like that, Ryan had become a property owner. He'd walked out of that courthouse with a deed in his hand and a knot in his stomach. wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life or the best gamble he'd ever take. Now, standing in his father's secret workshop, he understood it had been neither. It had been fate. Ryan pulled out his phone and started taking pictures. The tools, the drawings, the notebooks, everything. The workshop was remarkably well preserved, considering the building's exterior condition. Someone had kept the roof maintained, kept the weather out. The taxes had been paid. But according to the county clerk, the property had been abandoned for over 10 years before reverting to county ownership. His father had died in 2015, 10 years ago. The math lined up in a way that made Ryan's chest tighten. On the corkboard above the drafting table, Ryan found photographs pinned among the technical drawings. His father as a young man, maybe 30, standing in this very workshop with his arms crossed, a slight smile on his face. Another photo showed him bent over the drafting table, completely absorbed in his work. And there, partially hidden behind a calendar from 1999, was a photograph that made Ryan's breath catch. It showed his father holding a baby, holding Ryan. The infant was wrapped in a blue blanket, and his father's expression was one of pure, uncomplicated love. Ryan had never seen his father look like that. He'd never seen any photo of them together. His mother had removed all traces of his father from their lives after he left. Ryan carefully unpinned the photograph and held it under the light. On the back, in his father's handwriting, were the words, "Ryan, 3 months old. My greatest achievement." The words hit Ryan harder than he expected. He'd spent 37 years believing his father hadn't cared, that he'd walked away without looking back. But this workshop, these tools, these photographs, they told a different story. They spoke of a man who had kept working, kept building, kept hoping for something. Ryan sat down in the worn office chair at the drafting table, his father's chair, and looked around the workshop with new eyes. The main warehouse outside was in rough shape, but this room was sound. The lights worked. The structure was solid. With some effort, he could clean this place up, make it functional. He could actually start his repair business here, just as he'd planned. But more than that, he could understand who his father had really been. Under the workbench, Ryan noticed a metal lockbox, the kind that required a combination to open. He pulled it out and examined it. No rust, well maintained. He tried a few obvious combinations. His birthday, his father's birthday, old addresses he remembered. Nothing worked. On top of the lockbox, he found a stack of envelopes bound with a rubber band that crumbled when he touched it. The envelopes were addressed to him, Ryan Thorne, with his mother's old address, the house where he'd grown up. But none of them had been mailed. They had never left this workshop. Ryan's hands shook as he opened the first envelope. The letter inside was dated 15 years ago, 2 years before his father's death. "Dear Ryan," it began, "I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need to write it anyway. I need you to know that leaving was the hardest thing I ever did, and not a day has passed that I haven't regretted it. Your mother gave me a choice, give up my work and take a corporate job or leave. I chose my principles over my family, and I've paid for that choice every day since." Ryan read through the night in his apartment, sitting at his small kitchen table with the letters spread before him. There were dozens of them, spanning years. His father had poured his heart onto these pages, his regrets, his hopes, his dreams for Ryan's future. He wrote about the work he was doing in the workshop, inventions meant to help people, to make life better for communities that couldn't afford expensive solutions. In the last letter, dated just months before his death, his father wrote, "I'm running out of time. Ryan, the doctors say I have maybe a year left. I've spent it trying to finish the most important project of my life, not for money or recognition, but because it might actually help people. I've arranged things so that eventually this workshop will find its way to you. I hope when you see it, you'll understand what I was trying to do. I hope you'll forgive me for not being the father I should have been. And I hope you'll know that I never stopped loving you, not for a single moment." As the sun rose over the town, casting orange light through Ryan's apartment window, he made a decision. He would go back to that warehouse. He would understand his father's work, and somehow he would find a way to finish what his father had started. Ryan returned to the warehouse the next morning with a thermos of coffee and a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. The building looked different in daylight, still weathered and worn, but somehow less abandoned. He unlocked the front door and made his way straight to the back workshop, flipping on the lights as if he'd done it 1,000 times before. Today, he would document everything. He would understand what his father had been building. He started with the drafting table, carefully examining each blueprint and technical drawing. His father's handwriting was precise, almost architectural in its clarity. The first set of drawings showed a water filtration system, not the expensive high-tech kind that corporations sold, but something simpler. Something that could be built with readily available materials and maintained by someone with basic mechanical knowledge. Ryan found a journal entry tucked between the blueprints, dated March 1998. His father's voice came through clearly in the words, "Met with the community center in Riverside today. They're paying 3 times what they should for bottled water because their well system failed, and they can't afford the commercial filters. This is exactly the problem I need to solve. Clean water shouldn't be a luxury." Page after page revealed his father's process, sketches, calculations, failed attempts, breakthroughs. The man had been teaching himself advanced engineering through trial and error, driven by a desire to help communities that couldn't afford corporate solutions. There were designs for affordable solar panels, efficient heating systems for low-income housing, even a prototype for a wheelchair that could be assembled for under $200. Ryan sat back in his father's chair, overwhelmed. This wasn't the work of a failed drifter or an unstable man who couldn't hold down a job. This was the work of someone brilliant, someone who had chosen purpose over profit. On the corkboard, Ryan found more photographs. His father standing outside the warehouse in 1996, younger and full of hope. His father with another man, both of them smiling. The photo had KB and MT opening day written on the back. Who was KB? A partner? A friend? Ryan moved to the filing cabinet in the corner and began pulling open drawers. The first contained meticulous records, receipts for materials, logs of experiments, notes on designs. The second drawer held correspondence, letters from community organizations thanking his father for his help. A note from a school principal praising a science fair project his father had mentored. Evidence of a man who had quietly made a difference. The third drawer made Ryan's heart stop. It was filled with letters addressed to his mother, all returned unopened. Dozens of them spanning years. His father had tried to maintain contact, tried to stay connected, and been rejected every time. Beneath the returned letters, Ryan found a small notebook with personal written on the cover. He opened it carefully, feeling like an intruder, but unable to stop himself. The entries were sporadic, written during moments of reflection. June 2003 saw Ryan today from across the street. He was leaving school with friends, laughing about something. He's grown so tall. I wanted to call out to him, but what right do I have? I made my choice. I have to live with it. December 2008, sent another check to Sarah. She cashes them, but never acknowledges them. At least I know Ryan has what he needs. I just wish he knew I was thinking of him. April 2010. The doctor confirmed it today. Cancer, aggressive, maybe 2 years if I'm lucky. I need to finish the legacy project. It's the only thing I can leave him that might matter. Ryan's hands trembled as he read. His mother had accepted money from his father for years, but never told him. She had let him believe his father didn't care, had abandoned them completely, while his father watched from a distance and provided what he could. The anger came suddenly, hot and sharp. Anger at his mother for lying. Anger at his father for not fighting harder. Anger at himself for never questioning the story he'd been told. He pulled out his phone and called his mother. She answered on the third ring, her voice cautious. "Ryan, is everything okay? Did Dad send you money?" The words came out harsher than he intended. Silence, then quietly, "What brought this on?" "Answer the question, Mom. Did he send you money after he left?" "Ryan, it's complicated. Did he? Yes. Her voice was defensive now. Every month. Like clockwork. But that doesn't change what he did. He chose his obsessions over his family. His obsessions. Ryan looked around the workshop, at the evidence of his father's humanitarian work. He was trying to help people. He was building things that mattered. He was unstable, his mother said firmly. He quit a good job because of some idealistic nonsense about corporate ethics. He refused every reasonable opportunity because he wanted to chase impossible dreams. I gave him a choice, provide for his family or leave. He made his decision. You made him choose between his principles and his family. I made him choose between fantasy and reality. We had bills, Ryan. We had a child to raise. He wanted to save the world, but he couldn't even save his own marriage. Ryan's throat tightened. Why didn't you tell me he kept trying to contact us? Why did you return all his letters? Another long silence. Because I was angry. Because I was hurt. Because every letter was a reminder that he chose his workshop over us. He didn't choose the workshop over us. Mom, he just couldn't be who you wanted him to be. That's easy to say now, his mother replied, her voice cracking slightly. You weren't the one trying to make ends meet while he sent money from odd jobs instead of using his degree. You weren't the one explaining to a 7-year-old why his father wasn't coming home. Ryan closed his eyes. She wasn't wrong, not entirely. But she wasn't right either. He died 10 years ago. Did you know that? Yes, his lawyer contacted me about the estate. There wasn't much, except a warehouse full of his life's work. Ryan, don't romanticize this. He was a good man in many ways, but he wasn't cut out for family life. Some people aren't. After hanging up, Ryan sat in the silence of the workshop for a long time. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister asking if he could keep his daughter next weekend. He responded automatically, then stared at the message thread. His daughter, his responsibility, his choice to be present in her life, even when it was hard. Maybe his mother had been right to be angry. Maybe his father had made the wrong choice. But sitting here among his father's inventions, Ryan couldn't bring himself to judge. His father had tried to change the world in his own way, and he'd paid a heavy price for it. Ryan turned his attention back to the lockbox. He needed to know what was inside, what his father had protected so carefully. He studied the combination lock, 3 sets of numbers, each ranging from 0 to 9. Too many possibilities to guess randomly. He picked up the personal notebook again, looking for clues. Birth dates, addresses, significant numbers. And then he saw it, a seemingly random entry from 2012. Today would have been our 20th anniversary. Some promises are impossible to keep. His parents' anniversary. Ryan knew the date. His mother still got melancholy around it every year. He spun the combination lock, 07-15-92. The lock didn't open. He tried other variations. His own birthday. The date his father bought the warehouse. Nothing worked. Then Ryan noticed something he'd missed before. Next to the lockbox sat a blueprint labeled Project Legacy Final Design. The measurements at the bottom of the page included a series of numbers that seemed oddly specific. He tried them on the lock. The lockbox opened with a satisfying click. Inside, Ryan found a thick folder of documents, a USB drive, and an envelope marked "For Ryan, read this first." His hand shook as he opened the envelope. "Son," the letter began. "If you're reading this, you've found your way here. I knew you would. You were always smarter than you gave yourself credit for. Inside this box is everything I couldn't give you in life. The truth about what I was building, and why it mattered more to me than anything except you." Ryan read through tears he didn't try to hide. His father explained the Legacy Project, a desalination system that could turn ocean water into drinking water affordably enough for coastal communities in developing nations. He'd spent 15 years perfecting it, and it worked. The USB drive contained all the technical specifications and working models. "I never filed the patents," his father wrote, "because I was afraid. Afraid they'd be stolen. Afraid corporations would bury the designs. Afraid of repeating the mistakes I'd seen others make. But my fear accomplished nothing. These designs need to see the light of day, Ryan. They need someone brave enough to share them with the world. I hope that person is you." At the bottom of the lockbox, beneath the folder, Ryan found his father's life savings in cash, $47,000, carefully preserved. A note explained, "For manufacturing the first prototypes, for making this real, for doing what I couldn't." Ryan looked around the workshop with new understanding. This wasn't just a building he'd won at auction. This was his inheritance, not money or property, but purpose. His father had left him a mission, a choice to make. He could sell everything, take the money, solve his immediate problems. Or he could do what his father had hoped, what his father had died believing was possible. The weight of that choice settled on Ryan's shoulders like his father's hands, guiding him toward something greater than himself. Ryan didn't sleep that night. He sat at his kitchen table with his father's letter spread out before him, reading it over and over until he had memorized every word. The USB drive sat next to his laptop, still unopened. He was afraid to look at it, afraid of what it might reveal about his father's genius and his own inadequacy. At dawn, he made coffee and finally plugged in the drive. The files were meticulously organized: CAD drawings, material specifications, test results, cost analyses. His father had thought of everything. The desalination system was designed to be manufactured with standard industrial parts, assembled by someone with moderate mechanical skills, and maintained with basic tools. It was brilliant in its simplicity. Ryan clicked through the test results. His father had run hundreds of trials, documenting success rates, failure points, and improvements. The final design showed a 97% efficiency rate, better than many commercial systems costing 10 times as much. But there was something else in the files. A document titled "Letter to Ryan, 18th Birthday." Ryan's hand hovered over the mouse. He turned 18 19 years ago. This letter had been waiting all that time. He opened it. "Dear Ryan, today you become a man, and I'm not there to see it. That failure weighs on me more than I can express. I want you to know that every choice I made, right or wrong, came from a place of trying to do something meaningful with my life. I left your mother not because I didn't love her or you, but because I couldn't be the man she needed me to be, and maybe she was right to ask me to change. Some men are built for steady corporate jobs and predictable lives. I wasn't. I needed to create, to build, to solve problems that mattered. That need cost me everything, and I don't expect you to understand or forgive it. But I hope someday you'll know that I thought of you every single day. I hope you'll know that everything I built in this workshop was built with the dream that you might carry it forward. You have my hands, son. I saw it when you were small, the way you studied how things worked, the way you wanted to fix what was broken. That gift is worth more than any degree or any amount of money. Trust it, use it, make the world better than I could. With all my love, Dad." Ryan closed the laptop and put his head in his hands. The letter was dated 2006. His father had written it when Ryan was 17, planning ahead, hoping. And Ryan had spent that 18th birthday angry at a father he thought didn't care. He needed answers, real answers, not just letters and blueprints, but the truth about what had happened between his parents, about why his father had really left, about the decade of silence that had kept them apart. Ryan picked up his phone and dialed his mother again. When she answered, he spoke before she could. "Mom, I need you to tell me everything. No protecting me, no editing the story. I need the whole truth." His mother sighed, a sound that carried years of weariness. "What do you want to know? Why did Dad really leave?" "I told you." "No, you told me your version." "I want to know what he would have said." The silence stretched so long, Ryan thought she might have hung up. Then she spoke, her voice quieter than before. "Your father worked for an engineering firm when we got married. Good salary, benefits, future. Then one of his colleagues designed a new type of industrial air filter, something that could have saved lives in factories. The company buried it because it would have competed with a more profitable product line they already sold. Your father witnessed them destroy that man's career for speaking up about it." Ryan waited. "He quit the next day. Just walked out." Didn't consult me, didn't think about our mortgage or our bills or our future. He said he couldn't work for people with no integrity. I said integrity doesn't pay for groceries. We fought for months. He took odd jobs, freelance engineering work, anything to avoid going back to corporate life. The money was inconsistent. I was terrified. So you gave him an ultimatum. I gave him a choice, his mother corrected. Go back to steady work or leave. I thought he'd choose us. Instead, he chose his principles. Her voice cracked. And I've hated myself for that ultimatum every day since. But I hated him too for making me the villain, for making me choose between financial security and his dreams. Ryan's throat tightened. He kept sending money. I know. It wasn't enough, but it was something. I told myself I was protecting you from his instability, but really I was punishing him. I kept his letters from you. I told you he didn't care. I turned you against him because I was hurt. She paused. I'm not proud of it, Ryan. I was young and scared and angry. And by the time I realized what I'd done, he was already dying. You knew he was dying? His lawyer called me, asked if you might want to see him. I said no on your behalf. I told myself I was sparing you the pain of watching him die. But really, I couldn't face him. Couldn't face my own guilt. Ryan closed his eyes. Two people who had loved each other, who had loved him, torn apart by impossible choices and stubborn pride. No villains, just flawed humans trying to do what they thought was right. There's more, his mother said. His lawyer gave me something after he died. A letter for you. I kept it. I couldn't bring myself to destroy it, but I couldn't give it to you either. I still have it. I need it, Mom. I know. I'll bring it over. She arrived an hour later, looking older than Ryan remembered. She handed him an envelope, yellowed with age, sealed with wax like something from another era. Then she did something unexpected. She asked to see the warehouse. They drove in silence. When Ryan unlocked the workshop and turned on the lights, his mother stood in the doorway, her hand over her mouth. She moved slowly through the space, touching the tools, reading the notes, seeing what her late husband had built in the years without her. She stopped at the photograph of their younger selves, pinned among the blueprints. He kept this. He kept everything, Ryan said quietly. His mother picked up one of the journals and opened it randomly. Her eyes scanned the page, and tears began to fall. He was trying to change the world. He did change it. Just not in ways you could see. She set the journal down carefully, as if it was sacred. I was wrong about him. I thought his dreams were childish, impractical. I didn't understand that some people need to dream bigger than their own lives. And he was wrong too, Ryan said. He should have fought harder to stay in my life. He should have found a way to balance his mission with being my father. His mother nodded. We were both too proud, too hurt, and you paid the price. They sat together in his father's workshop, two people grieving a man they'd both loved and both failed to understand. Finally, his mother spoke again. What will you do with all this? Ryan looked around at the inventions, the blueprints, the life's work of a man who had sacrificed everything for his principles. I don't know yet, but I think I need to find out who KB is. Dad mentioned him in several letters. They were partners or friends, someone who knew him during all those years we didn't. His mother thought for a moment. Kenneth Briggs. He was your father's attorney. Helped him set up the warehouse lease, handled legal matters. Your father trusted him completely. Is he still alive? I think so. Last I heard, he retired here in town. Ryan felt something shift inside him. Kenneth Briggs might hold the missing pieces of his father's story. He might know why his father never filed the patents, what he'd been so afraid of, what the full legacy project entailed. After his mother left, Ryan opened the sealed letter she'd brought. His father's handwriting, shaky near the end, filled the page. Ryan, I'm dying. The cancer won the race against time. I didn't finish everything I hoped to finish, but I finished enough. The workshop is yours. I've arranged it legally so it will find its way back to you. Everything I built was built for you, not to burden you, but to show you what's possible when you choose purpose over comfort. I don't expect you to continue my work. I only hope you'll know I never stopped being your father, even when I wasn't allowed to act like one. Forgive me. Forgive your mother. We were both doing our best with broken hearts. All my love, always, Dad. Ryan folded the letter carefully and placed it in his pocket. Then he searched online for Kenneth Briggs, attorney, retired. He found an address across town, a modest house in a quiet neighborhood. Tomorrow he would visit Kenneth Briggs. Tomorrow he would learn the rest of his father's story. And somehow he would figure out what to do with the inheritance he'd been given. Not just money and blueprints, but a choice about who he wanted to be. Kenneth Briggs lived in a small ranch house with a well-maintained garden and a mailbox shaped like a courthouse. Ryan stood on the front porch for a full minute before knocking, rehearsing what he'd say, how he'd explain who he was and why he'd come. The man who answered the door was in his late 70s, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the posture of someone who'd spent a career standing before judges. He looked at Ryan with curiosity that shifted quickly to recognition. "My God," Kenneth said quietly. "You look just like him. You knew my father, Michael Thorne." Kenneth's voice carried warmth and sadness in equal measure. "Yes, I knew him. I knew him well. Please, come in." The house was filled with books, law volumes, historical texts, novels arranged by author on floor-to-ceiling shelves. Kenneth led Ryan to a study where sunlight streamed through large windows. On the wall hung a photograph Ryan recognized immediately. Two young men standing outside the warehouse, arms around each other's shoulders, grinning at the camera. His father and Kenneth, probably 30 years ago. "I've been wondering if you'd ever come looking," Kenneth said, settling into a leather chair and gesturing for Ryan to sit. "Your father always hoped you would. How long did you know him?" 15 years. From the day he walked into my office asking about property law and patent protection. He was different from my usual clients, intense, idealistic, absolutely certain he was going to change the world. Kenneth smiled at the memory. "And you know what? He might have if he hadn't been so afraid." "Afraid of what?" Kenneth stood and moved to a filing cabinet, pulling out a thick folder. "Your father witnessed something early in his career that scarred him deeply. A colleague's invention stolen and suppressed by their employer. He watched that man lose everything, his career, his reputation, his spirit. Your father vowed it would never happen to him. He became paranoid about protecting his work. He never filed patents. Oh, he filed them." Kenneth opened the folder, revealing stacks of official documents. "Through me, in my name. He trusted me to hold them until the time was right." Ryan stared at the patents. "But these are registered to you, in trust for your father and through him, to you. Everything legal and documented. Your father knew he was dying, Ryan. He spent his last year making sure everything would come to you eventually. The warehouse, the patents, all of it. I'm the executor of his estate. I've been waiting for you to claim your inheritance." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "Why didn't you contact me?" "Your father made me promise not to. He said you needed to find your way here on your own when you were ready. He was afraid if I approached you directly, you'd reject it out of loyalty to your mother. He wanted you to discover the truth naturally, to make your own choice about what to do with his life's work." Ryan's hands trembled as he held the patents. Water filtration systems, solar panel designs, affordable medical equipment. And there at the bottom of the stack, the desalination system, patent pending, filed 3 months before his father's death. Why didn't he commercialize any of these? With your help, he could have licensed them, made money, used the resources to do even more. Kenneth's expression darkened. Because 6 months before he died, someone tried to steal them. Representatives from a company called Clearwater Solutions somehow learned about the desalination design. They approached your father with an offer. Sell them the patent for a token amount, and they'd develop it. He refused. Then strange things started happening. What kind of things? Break-ins at the warehouse. Nothing stolen but files disturbed. Phone calls with no one on the other end. A car following him. Your father became convinced corporate spies were after his work. He encrypted everything, hid the most important designs, and stopped going to the workshop regularly. That's why the place looked abandoned. He was trying to protect it by making it seem worthless. Ryan thought of the locked workshop, the preserved space behind the warped door. He was protecting it for me, always for you. Everything was always for you. Kenneth handed Ryan another document. This is his will. Very simple. Everything goes to his son, Ryan Thorne. The warehouse, the patents, the rights to all designs, and Kenneth pulled out a bank statement. Approximately $47,000 in savings. Ryan had found that money in the lockbox. His father had converted it to cash, probably afraid it could be traced or frozen. The paranoia had been real. There's something else you should know, Kenneth continued. 3 weeks before your father died, Clearwater Solutions contacted me directly. They discovered the patents were filed in my name. They offered $2.3 million for the desalination system alone. Ryan's breath caught. What did you do? I asked your father. He was in hospice by then, barely conscious most days. But he was clear about this. He said no. He said the design was meant for communities that needed it, not corporations that would bury it or price it out of reach. He made me promise to never sell to them, to only transfer the patents to you, and you kept that promise. I loved your father like a brother, Kenneth said simply. He was the most principled man I've ever known. Frustrating as hell sometimes, but genuine in ways most people never are. I wasn't going to betray him in death after standing by him in life. Ryan studied the old attorney, seeing his father's friend clearly now. Why did he trust you so completely? Kenneth smiled. Because I was the only person who never tried to change him. Your mother wanted him to be more practical. His colleagues thought he was naive. His family considered him a failure. But I saw what he was, a man trying to do something that mattered. I helped him however I could, even when I thought he was being too cautious or too idealistic. That's what friendship is. Tell me about him. The parts I never got to see. For the next 2 hours, Kenneth shared stories. His father's laugh, his terrible coffee-making skills, his habit of working through the night when inspiration struck. The time he spent an entire weekend helping a neighbor fix their well pump for free. His terrible jokes and his surprising knowledge of classical music. The way he talked about Ryan with such pride, such longing, such hope, that someday they might reconnect. He never blamed your mother, you know, Kenneth said. He understood why she'd made the choices she made. He blamed himself for not being strong enough to keep his family together while pursuing his dreams. That guilt ate at him. He shouldn't have had to choose. No, he shouldn't have. But life isn't always fair about the choices it forces on us. Kenneth stood and retrieved something from his desk drawer, a key on a simple ring. This opens a storage unit across town. Your father kept backup files there, things he thought were too sensitive to leave at the warehouse. The address is on the tag. Everything in there is yours now. Ryan took the key, feeling its weight. What am I supposed to do with all this, Kenneth? I'm not an engineer. I'm a handyman who barely graduated high school. How am I supposed to honor his legacy when I don't have his mind? You have something better, Kenneth said firmly. You have his heart. Your father's greatest invention wasn't any machine. It was his ability to see what people needed and care enough to try to help them. That's not about education or credentials. That's about character. Ryan looked at the patents spread across Kenneth's desk. Clearwater Solutions. They could still be interested. They contacted me again 6 months ago. Increased their offer to $3.5 million for just the desalination system. Just that one. The others could be worth millions more if properly developed and licensed. Ryan was quiet for a long moment. Financial security. College fund for his daughter. The ability to actually breathe without counting every dollar. It was everything he needed, but his father had said no. Had died saying no. Had trusted Ryan to say no. I need time to think, Ryan said finally. I need to understand what he built before I decide what to do with it. Kenneth nodded approvingly. That's exactly what he would have said. Take all the time you need. The patents are secure. The warehouse is yours, and I'm here whenever you need guidance, legal or otherwise. As Ryan stood to leave, Kenneth placed a hand on his shoulder. Your father told me once that his greatest regret wasn't leaving his job or losing his marriage. It was losing his son. You're here now, trying to understand him, trying to honor what he built. That would mean everything to him. Ryan drove to the storage unit, a cinder block building in an industrial park. Inside Unit 47, he found filing cabinets, boxes of prototypes, and detailed journals spanning 20 years. His father's complete archive, preserved and protected. On top of the first filing cabinet sat an envelope marked, "For Ryan, start here." Inside was a single sheet of paper with his father's handwriting. "If you're reading this, you've found Kenneth, and he's told you the truth. Now comes the hard part, deciding what kind of man you want to be. I won't tell you what to do. I've stolen enough of your choices already by not being there. But I'll tell you what I learned. Money and security are important, but they're not everything. Purpose matters. Integrity matters. The work you do and why you do it matters. Choose wisely, son. Choose better than I did. Choose to be whole in ways I never was. I believe in you, Dad." Ryan sat on the concrete floor, surrounded by his father's life's work, understanding finally what had been given to him. Not just inventions and patents and money, but a question: what do you stand for? And for the first time in his life, Ryan thought he might know the answer. Ryan spent the next 3 days moving everything from the storage unit to the warehouse workshop. Box by box, file by file, he transported his father's archive back to where it belonged. Each item told part of the story: receipts for materials purchased in 1997, sketches of designs that had never made it past the conceptual stage, photographs of prototypes being tested in community centers and small towns. One photograph stopped him cold. His father standing with a group of elderly residents outside a rural community center, all of them smiling, holding glasses of water. On the back, someone had written, "First successful installation. Henderson County, 2004. Changed everything." Ryan searched through the corresponding files and found documentation of that installation. His father had built and donated a complete water filtration system to a community whose well had been contaminated. The system had served 200 families for over a decade. There were thank you letters, photographs of children drinking clean water, a certificate of appreciation from the county. His father hadn't just designed solutions, he'd implemented them. He'd given them away. He'd quietly changed lives while the world thought he was a failure. Ryan pulled out his phone and took photographs of everything, building a digital archive. Then he began the slow process of reading through his father's master journals. The ones Kenneth had kept safe for years. The entries painted a portrait of a complicated man. Brilliant and stubborn, generous and prideful, loving and distant. His father had wrestled with his choices constantly, second-guessing himself in private while maintaining absolute conviction in public. March 2003 saw Sarah and Ryan at the grocery store today. I hid in the next aisle like a coward. Ryan is 10 now, nearly as tall as his mother. What have I missed? What have I thrown away? But when I come back to the workshop and see the prototype working, when I think about the families who'll have clean water because of this work, does that balance the scale? Can anything balance that scale? July 2007. Kenneth thinks I should license the solar panel design. Says we could make enough money to fund the other projects properly. But I remember what happened to Anderson at my old firm. The moment you let corporations touch your work, it stops being yours. It becomes a commodity, something to be optimized for profit rather than impact. I can't do it. I won't. November 2010. The diagnosis came today. 2 years, maybe less. I'm not afraid of dying, but I'm terrified of leaving this unfinished. The desalination system is so close, months away, not years. If I can complete it, if I can document it properly, maybe Ryan will find it someday. Maybe he'll understand what I was trying to do. Maybe he'll forgive me. Ryan set down the journal, his vision blurred. His father had been racing against death, trying to finish one last gift for communities that needed it, and for the son he'd lost. He returned to the workshop's main bench, where the incomplete water filter prototype still sat. His father's last hands-on project, abandoned when illness made the work impossible. Ryan studied the design, comparing it to the blueprints and notes. Most of the components were assembled. the housing, the filtration membranes, the flow regulation system. What remained were the final connections and calibration. Ryan had rebuilt car engines, fixed commercial HVAC systems, rewired houses. He understood mechanical systems intuitively, even if he couldn't articulate the engineering principles behind them. He picked up his father's tools, a ratchet set, precision screwdrivers, measurement instruments, and was struck by how naturally they fit his hands. These were good tools, maintained with care, organized with purpose. His father's tool belt hung on a hook nearby, leather worn soft from years of use. Ryan took it down and buckled it around his waist. It fit perfectly. He worked slowly, methodically, following his father's assembly notes. The process was meditative. Each connection made with attention, each measurement verified twice. Hours passed without him noticing. The warehouse grew dark, and he switched on additional work lights, creating a bubble of brightness around the bench. At midnight, Ryan stepped back and studied the completed filter. It looked exactly like the blueprint. Now came the real test. Would it actually work? He'd brought water jugs from home, including some intentionally contaminated with dirt, rust particles, and food coloring to simulate pollutants. He connected the input hose to the contaminated water, checked all the seals, and opened the flow valve. The system hummed to life. Water moved through the filtration stages, visible through the clear housing components his father had designed for diagnostic purposes. The contaminated brown water entered the first chamber, flowed through the membrane filters, passed through the carbon stage, and emerged from the output clear and clean. Ryan caught some in a glass and held it up to the light. Crystal clear. He tasted it. Pure, no chemical flavor, no hint of the contamination. His father's design worked flawlessly. He sat down heavily on a stool, the completed filter running quietly beside him. This wasn't just a functional prototype. It was proof that his father's genius had been real, that the years of sacrifice had produced something genuinely valuable. Ryan pulled out his phone and called Kenneth. Not caring that it was past midnight, "I got it working," he said when Kenneth answered groggily. "The water filter prototype. It works perfectly. Michael would be proud." Kenneth's voice was warm despite the hour. "What are you going to do now?" "I don't know yet. But I needed to know if his designs were real or just the dreams of a sick man." "They're real, Kenneth. Everything he built was real. I never doubted it. Neither should you." After hanging up, Ryan walked through the warehouse, seeing it with fresh eyes. The space his father had maintained for decades, the workshop preserved like a shrine, the inventions waiting for someone to carry them forward. His father had built all this while working odd jobs, while scraping by, while watching his son grow up from a distance. Ryan thought about his own life, the struggle to make rent, the constant scramble for work, the fear that he wasn't providing enough for his daughter. He and his father had lived parallel lives, both trying to do meaningful work while battling financial insecurity, both sacrificing present comfort for future possibility. The difference was that his father had died before seeing his work reach the world. Ryan still had time. He returned to the workshop and opened the safe again, retrieving the cash his father had saved. $47,000. His father's instructions had been clear for manufacturing the first prototypes, for making this real. But there was another document in the safe Ryan hadn't fully examined, a business proposal his father had drafted but never pursued. Ryan spread it across the drafting table and began reading. His father had envisioned a non-profit foundation called the Clean Water Initiative. The document outlined everything: organizational structure, manufacturing partnerships, distribution networks, funding models. It was a complete roadmap for turning the inventions into actual solutions for communities in need. His father had even identified potential board members, community organizers, retired engineers, environmental advocates, people who shared his values and could help guide the work. Kenneth's name appeared as legal counsel. Everything was planned, except the courage to execute it. Ryan's phone buzzed. A text from his sister. "Can you take Sophie next weekend?" Emergency came up. His daughter, Sophie. He'd barely thought about her these past few days, so consumed by his father's legacy. She was 8 years old now, the same age Ryan had been when his father left. What lessons was he teaching her by diving so deep into this obsession? Was he repeating his father's mistakes? But then he thought about the photograph of families with clean water, about the children who had access to resources they'd never had before because one man had chosen purpose over profit. That mattered too, maybe more than anything. Ryan texted back, "Of course. Love you both." He looked around the workshop one more time before heading home. Tomorrow he would make a decision. He would choose between selling the patents for financial security or pursuing his father's vision of the Clean Water Initiative. But tonight, he let himself simply exist in this space his father had built, surrounded by the evidence of a complicated man's complicated life, feeling the weight and the gift of the inheritance he'd been given. The tool belt still hung around his waist. His father's tools. His tools now, passed from one generation to the next, carrying with them the possibility of building something that mattered. Ryan turned off the lights and locked the workshop door, the key heavy in his palm. Whatever he decided, whatever path he chose, one thing was certain: he finally understood his father. And that understanding, perhaps, was the greatest inheritance of all. Ryan woke to sunlight streaming through his apartment windows and the smell of burnt toast. He'd fallen asleep at the kitchen table again, his father's master journal open before him, pages marked with sticky notes. His neck ached from the awkward angle, and his coffee from last night had formed a cold film on top. He rubbed his eyes and checked his phone. 7 missed calls from his sister, 3 texts asking if he was okay. He'd been disappearing into the warehouse for days, emerging only for food and a few hours of restless sleep. His life was becoming unbalanced, tilting toward obsession the same way his father's had. Ryan called his sister back. "I'm fine. Just working on something." "You sound like Dad used to," she said, worry evident in her voice. "Mom told me what you found. Ryan, be careful. Don't lose yourself in this." "I'm not losing myself. I'm finding something." That's what he would have said too. The words stung because they were true. Ryan ended the call and stared at the journal in front of him. His father's handwriting filled every page. Calculations, observations, doubts, dreams. The later entries grew shakier as illness progressed, but the passion never wavered. January 2014. "The pain is worse today. Kenneth brought me a wheelchair for the workshop. I refused it. Stubborn pride, he says. Maybe. But if I can't walk into my own workspace, what's the point? The desalination system is nearly complete. I've tested it 47 times. 47 successes, it works. God, it works beautifully. But I'm running out of time to document everything properly. Running out of time to make sure Ryan understands." Ryan turned to the next entry, dated 3 months later. April 2014. "Moved into hospice today. Kenneth promised to preserve everything, the workshop, the patents, the documentation. I made him swear he'd give it all to Ryan when the time was right. I wanted to contact my son one last time, explain everything face to face. But what right do I have? I left him. I chose my work over my family. Some mistakes can't be forgiven, only endured. If he finds this journal, if he reads these words, Ryan, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I'm not sorry for the work. It mattered. It still matters. I hope you understand the difference." Ryan closed the journal, unable to continue. His phone rang. "Kenneth, I've been thinking about your situation," Kenneth said without preamble. "You're standing at the same crossroads your father faced. The difference is you don't have to stand there alone. I'd like to help you, whatever you decide. I don't even know what I'm deciding. Sell the patents and secure my future? Or chase my father's dream and risk everything? Those aren't your only options. There's a middle path, one your father was too proud or too afraid to take. What do you mean? Come to my office. I want to show you something." An hour later, Ryan sat across from Kenneth's desk, looking at a folder labeled Clearwater Solutions, Correspondence 2015 present. "After your father died," Kenneth explained, "I continued monitoring Clearwater Solutions. They're not the predatory corporation your father feared. They're actually a certified B Corp, a benefit corporation legally required to balance profit with social good. They manufacture water treatment systems primarily for disaster relief and developing nations. Dad said they tried to steal his designs. He believed that, yes. But I've investigated thoroughly. What your father interpreted as corporate espionage was actually clumsy due diligence. They'd heard rumors of his work through engineering networks and wanted to verify the designs before making an offer. Your father's paranoia, understandable given his past experiences, turned interest into threat. Kenneth pulled out more documents. They've made 3 offers over the years, each more generous than the last. The current offer is $3.5 million for the desalination patent alone. But here's what your father didn't know. They're willing to structure the deal differently. How? Licensing instead of outright sale. You retain ownership of the patent. They pay for manufacturing and distribution. You receive royalties on every unit produced, plus a seat on their advisory board to ensure the technology is used as intended, for communities in need, not maximum profit extraction. Ryan stared at the proposal. This is what he should have done, perhaps. Or perhaps his refusal created this opportunity. Clearwater has spent the last decade proving their commitment to ethical manufacturing. They've earned their reputation. Your father's stubbornness, his insistence on protecting the work, may have ensured it ended up in the right hands. You really think they're trustworthy? I've had my investigators examine everything. Their financial records, their distribution networks, testimonials from communities they've served. They're legitimate. More importantly, their CEO lost his daughter to waterborne illness in a refugee camp. This work is personal for him, not just business. Ryan felt something shift inside him. What about the other patents? The solar designs, the medical equipment? Similar arrangements could be made. Different companies, all carefully vetted. You could generate ongoing income while ensuring the inventions actually help people. It's not choosing between money and mission, it's choosing both. Dad would never have believed that was possible. Your father's greatest weakness was his inability to trust. It cost him his marriage, his relationship with you, and ultimately the impact his work could have had during his lifetime. Don't inherit that weakness along with his strengths. Ryan spent the afternoon in Kenneth's office, reviewing the proposals, asking questions, imagining possibilities. By evening, a plan had begun to take shape. Not his father's plan, not the corporate buyout, but something in between. Something that honored the work while acknowledging the practical realities his father had refused to face. I want to do it, Ryan said finally. But on one condition. I established the Clean Water Initiative as Dad planned, a non-profit foundation. Clearwater Solutions licenses the desalination patent and pays royalties directly to the foundation. The foundation uses those funds to provide free installations to communities that can't afford to buy them. Clearwater still profits from commercial sales, but the humanitarian mission stays protected, Kenneth smiled. Your father would have fought me for months before agreeing to something that sensible. You're smarter than he was. No, I just have the benefit of learning from his mistakes. They spent the next week working out details. Kenneth handled the legal framework, while Ryan cleaned and organized the warehouse. The main space would become the foundation's headquarters. The workshop would remain exactly as his father had left it, a memorial and an inspiration. Ryan contacted several people from his father's list of potential board members. Most didn't remember Michael Thorne initially, but when Ryan explained the work and showed them the prototypes, old memories surfaced. A retired community organizer remembered Ryan's father installing a filtration system at a homeless shelter. An environmental engineer recalled consulting with him on a solar panel design. Small impacts quietly made, now bearing fruit years later. One afternoon, while testing the desalination prototype, Ryan had an unexpected visitor. An elderly man in overalls stood in the warehouse doorway, squinting into the dim interior. "Help you?" Ryan called out. "Heard Michael Thorne's boy was fixing up the old place," the man said, stepping inside. "Wanted to pay my respects. You knew my father?" "He fixed my son's wheelchair. Free of charge." When I offered to pay, he said helping was payment enough. The man's eyes grew wet. My boy's gone now. Car accident 5 years back. But those last years, being mobile because of your dad's work, they mattered. Just wanted you to know he was a good man. After the man left, Ryan sat quietly in his father's chair, overwhelmed by the weight of stories he'd never heard. Lives his father had touched without seeking recognition or reward. His father hadn't been a failure. He'd been a silent hero, too humble or too wounded to claim credit for the good he'd done. That evening, Ryan visited his mother. She made tea and they sat at her kitchen table, a reversal of all the times he'd sat there as a child, while she explained why his father wasn't coming back. I'm starting Dad's foundation, he said. The Clean Water Initiative. Kenneth's helping me structure it properly. We're licensing the patents to ethical companies and using the royalties to fund free installations for communities in need. His mother was quiet for a long moment. Your father would be proud. And relieved. He always wanted the work to reach people, but he was too afraid to trust anyone with it. I'm not afraid the way he was, but I'm also not naive. Kenneth's teaching me how to protect the mission while being practical about the business side. That's wisdom your father never found. She reached across the table and took his hand. Don't make his other mistake, though. Don't let the work consume you. Your daughter needs you present in her life, not just financially secure. I know. I'm trying to find balance. He tried too, Ryan. He just didn't know how. Promise me you'll keep trying even when it's hard. I promise. Ryan returned to the warehouse that night and wrote in a new journal he'd started, his own record of the journey. Parallel to his father's, he wrote about the decisions he was making, the reasons behind them, the hope that he could succeed where his father had struggled. On the last page of his father's master journal, Ryan found a final entry, written in barely legible handwriting. To whoever reads this, probably Ryan, hopefully Ryan, know that every choice I made, right or wrong, came from trying to live with integrity. I failed at many things. I succeeded at a few. The work in this workshop represents the best of what I was capable of. Use it wisely, use it well. And forgive me for not being strong enough to be both the father you needed and the man I needed to be. Perhaps you'll find a way to be both. I believe you can. I believe in you. Always, Dad. Ryan closed the journal and placed it carefully on the shelf with the others. His father's story was complete. Now it was time to write his own. Ryan was drafting the Foundation's charter when the certified letter arrived. The return address belonged to a law firm he didn't recognize, Hastings and Wade, with offices in the state capital. His first thought was that someone was contesting his father's estate, trying to claim a piece of what he'd inherited. He opened it, standing in the warehouse doorway. Morning sun warming his back. The letter was dated 3 weeks before his father's death. It had been held by the law firm per instructions, to be delivered when Michael Thorne's son claims the warehouse property. Somehow they'd been monitoring county records. Waiting for this moment, Ryan's hands began to shake as he read, Dear Mr. Thorne, this firm represents Clearwater Solutions in matters pertaining to patent acquisition and intellectual property. We are writing to inform you of developments regarding U.S. patent application 14892-047, modular desalination system, filed by Kenneth Briggs, attorney at law. Our client has maintained interest in this technology and wishes to discuss acquisition terms. We attempted to contact your father, Michael Thorne, on several occasions prior to his passing without success. We understand the patent was filed by Mr. Briggs, but represents work developed by your father. We are prepared to offer $2.3 million for full rights and transfer of ownership. Ryan's vision narrowed. Kenneth had filed the patent in his own name. Kenneth, who claimed to be his father's closest friend. Kenneth, who had been holding everything in trust. The letter continued, We have reason to believe Mr. Briggs may claim ownership of the patent despite its origin. We wanted to ensure the rightful heir is aware of this situation and has opportunity to contest any improper claims. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience. Ryan's mind raced through every conversation with Kenneth, every seemingly helpful gesture, every piece of advice. Had it all been manipulation? Had Kenneth been waiting for his father to die so he could claim the patents for himself? He drove to Kenneth's house, the letter crumpled in his fist. He didn't call ahead. He needed to see Kenneth's face when confronted. Kenneth answered the door in a cardigan and reading glasses, holding a cup of coffee. His expression shifted from welcome to concern when he saw Ryan's face. "What's wrong?" Ryan thrust the letter at him. "Tell me this isn't what it looks like." Kenneth read it, his face paling. He stepped aside, gesturing Ryan in. "Come inside, please. Just tell me the truth. Did you file those patents in your name to steal them?" "What? No?" "Ryan, sit down." "I don't want to sit down. I want answers." Ryan's voice cracked. "My father trusted you. I trusted you. Was any of it real?" Kenneth set down his coffee with deliberate care. "Everything was real. Your father asked me to file the patents in my name. He was terrified they'd be stolen if they were connected to him directly. He'd been threatened, followed, or so he thought. You said his paranoia wasn't justified. That Clearwater Solutions was legitimate. They are legitimate now. But back then, there were other interested parties. Your father wasn't entirely wrong to be careful." Kenneth moved to his filing cabinet and pulled out a folder. "I have documentation. Your father's written authorization for me to file patents on his behalf. Legal trust documents specifying everything transfers to you upon his death." He spread papers across his desk, forms signed by Michael Thorne, notarized and dated. "Everything is legal and proper. I never intended to claim ownership. The firm that sent you that letter is trying to create doubt, trying to bypass me and negotiate directly with you because they think you'll be easier to manipulate." Ryan studied the documents, his anger warring with doubt. The signatures looked genuine. The dates matched Kenneth's timeline. But if everything's legitimate, why did this law firm think you might claim ownership? Where did they get that idea? Kenneth's jaw tightened. "Because I made inquiries about the patent's value. I wanted to know what offers might come, what you'd be dealing with. Someone misinterpreted my questions as personal interest rather than fiduciary duty." He met Ryan's eyes. "I should have been more careful. I'm sorry this reached you this way." Ryan sank into a chair, exhausted. "I don't know what to believe anymore." "Then don't believe me. Verify." Kenneth pulled out a business card. "This is the notary who witnessed all these documents. Call her. She'll confirm everything. And here," he opened another drawer and retrieved a sealed envelope. "Your father gave me this. He said if you ever doubted me, I should give you this letter." Ryan took the envelope. His name was written on it in his father's handwriting, along with, "In case of distrust." His hands shook as he opened it. "Ryan, if you're reading this, something has made you doubt Kenneth. Don't. He's the most trustworthy man I've ever known. I put the patents in his name because I trust him completely, more than I trust myself. Whatever has made you suspicious, investigate it thoroughly. But know that Kenneth has never betrayed me and never will. He's been more of a brother to me than my own blood. Trust him as I do. Love, Dad." Ryan's eyes burned. He looked up at Kenneth, who was watching him with patient sadness. "I'm sorry," Ryan whispered. "I should have known better. You should have questioned me." Kenneth's voice was gentle but firm. "Your father's mistake was trusting too little. Yours would be trusting too much. Verify everything, even from me, especially from me. That's how you protect his legacy properly." Ryan spent the next hour making calls. The notary confirmed everything. The patent office verified Kenneth's trusteeship status. Even Clearwater Solutions, when Ryan called them directly, confirmed they'd been trying to negotiate through Kenneth, but grew frustrated with his careful scrutiny of their proposals. "Your attorney is extremely thorough," their CEO told Ryan, "which gave us confidence the technology was being properly protected. We've increased our offer specifically because we respect how carefully Mr. Briggs has managed this." When Ryan returned to Kenneth's house that afternoon, he brought coffee and an apology. "I nearly destroyed the best alliance I have because of one letter designed to create exactly that response," Ryan said. "Corporate lawyers play psychological games. They tried to isolate you from your advisor so they could pressure you into a quick, disadvantageous decision. Your father fell for similar tactics, saw threats where there were none, missed opportunities because of paranoia. How do I know the difference? How do I know when suspicion is justified? You verify. You ask questions. You trust but confirm, Kenneth smiled. And you keep people around you who will tell you the truth even when it's uncomfortable. That's what I'm here for. Ryan pulled out the letter again, reading it more carefully. They mention other interested parties who tried to steal the patents. Was that real or more manipulation? Kenneth's expression grew serious. That was real. In 2014, someone broke into your father's workshop twice. Nothing was stolen, but files were photographed. We never identified who, but your father became convinced his work was being monitored by competitors. That's when he encrypted everything and stopped going to the warehouse regularly. So his paranoia had basis in reality. Some of it, yes, but he let that fear paralyze him. He could have pursued his work more effectively with proper legal protection and partnerships. Instead, he isolated himself. Kenneth paused. Don't make the same mistake. Be cautious, but don't let caution become paralysis. Ryan nodded slowly. The letter sat between them on the desk, a weapon that had nearly destroyed their partnership, now diffused by transparency and verification. What do we do about Hastings and Wade? Ryan asked. We ignore them. They represent Clearwater Solutions, but not very well. I've been negotiating with the company's in-house counsel directly. We're close to terms that would satisfy everyone. Licensing with royalties, foundation funding, ethical use requirements. These outside lawyers are trying to shortcut that process. Will they try again? Probably. Which is why you need to be prepared. Your father's work is valuable, Ryan, very valuable. There will be more attempts to separate you from proper guidance, to pressure you into bad decisions. You need to be strong enough to resist. Ryan thought about his father, alone in this workshop, trusting no one, protecting his work so carefully that it never reached the people who needed it. Then he thought about Kenneth, patiently managing patents for years without compensation, waiting for the right moment to transfer everything to a son he'd never met. Thank you, Ryan said, for keeping faith with him, for keeping faith with me, even when I didn't deserve it. Your father was my friend, Kenneth said simply. Helping his son honor his legacy, that's the last thing I can do for him. They spent the evening reviewing the legitimate Clearwater Solutions proposal, comparing it to the suspicious letter's terms. The difference was stark. The real offer protected Ryan's interests while ensuring the technology reached communities in need. The letter's offer would have signed away all rights for a fraction of the true value. Ryan understood finally what his father had been protecting against. Not just theft of designs, but theft of purpose. The technology wasn't just valuable in dollars. It was valuable in lives changed, communities helped, problems solved. That value couldn't be measured on a balance sheet. As he drove home that night, Ryan felt the weight of responsibility settle more firmly on his shoulders. He wasn't just inheriting inventions and patents. He was inheriting his father's mission, his father's fears, and his father's hope that someone would carry the work forward properly. The letter sat in his passenger seat, a reminder that threats were real but not insurmountable. Knowledge and verification were armor. Trust, carefully given and properly confirmed, was strength. His father had died isolated and afraid. Ryan would succeed by being neither. The negotiations with Clearwater Solutions took 3 weeks of careful back and forth. Ryan insisted on reading every clause, understanding every implication. Kenneth guided him through the legal language, but the decisions were Ryan's to make. They structured the deal exactly as Ryan had envisioned. Clearwater Solutions would license the desalination patent for manufacturing and commercial distribution. Royalties would flow directly to the Clean Water Initiative Foundation, which Ryan was establishing with Kenneth as legal counsel. The foundation would provide free installations to communities unable to afford commercial systems. Your father would have fought this arrangement, Kenneth said as they reviewed the final contract. He would have seen compromise as betrayal. My father was wrong about some things, Ryan replied. Being right isn't worth dying with your work trapped in a warehouse. The Foundation's articles of incorporation were filed on a Tuesday morning. Ryan stood in the warehouse, his warehouse now, his father's legacy, and felt the weight of what he was building. Not just a non-profit organization, but a bridge between his father's idealism and the practical reality of helping people. He'd cleaned the main warehouse space thoroughly over the past weeks. The workshop remained untouched, preserved exactly as his father had left it, but the larger area had been transformed into a functional headquarters. Desks arranged along one wall, filing cabinets for the growing documentation, a conference table salvaged from an office liquidation sale. Ryan had recruited 3 board members from his father's original list. They'd all agreed immediately when they understood the mission. A retired civil engineer named Bernard, who'd consulted with his father years ago. A community organizer named Patricia, who remembered Michael Thorne installing filters in her shelter. And Kenneth, providing legal oversight. The first board meeting was scheduled for Friday, 3 days away. Ryan had spent every evening preparing financial projections, operational plans, manufacturing timelines. He wanted everything perfect, wanted to prove he was worthy of his father's trust. His phone rang. Clearwater Solutions. Mr. Thorne, we'd like to move forward with a pilot project. There's a coastal community in Central America that's been requesting our systems but can't afford them. Perfect test case for the Foundation model. Could you have a system ready in 6 weeks? 6 weeks. Ryan looked at the desalination prototype sitting on his father's workbench. It worked in controlled tests, but deploying it in the field was different. He'd need to build a complete unit, not just demonstrate the principle. He'd need to ensure it could be maintained by people without engineering degrees. He'd need to prove his father's design was as revolutionary as the blueprints promised. Yes, Ryan said. 6 weeks. After hanging up, panic set in. He'd committed to something he wasn't certain he could deliver. His father had spent 15 years perfecting the design. Ryan had 6 weeks to build, test, and prepare the first field installation. He called Bernard, the retired engineer. I need help, real help. Can you come to the warehouse? Bernard arrived within the hour. He studied the prototype, reviewed the blueprints, and nodded slowly. Your father's design is solid. Better than solid, it's elegant. We can do this in 6 weeks if we work smart. I know manufacturers who can fabricate the housing. I know a machinist who owes me favors for the membrane components. What we need is someone to coordinate everything and assemble the final system. That's me, Ryan said. I can do that. They worked 18-hour days. Bernard handled procurement, while Ryan transformed the warehouse into an assembly facility. He cleared space, organized tools, created workstations for each component of the system. The leather tool belt his father had worn now hung around Ryan's waist daily, a constant reminder of whose work he was continuing. Patricia, the community organizer, managed logistics. She coordinated with Clearwater Solutions on shipping, communicated with the community receiving the system, and handled the bureaucratic requirements for international installation. Kenneth kept everything legal and proper, filing paperwork, managing contracts, ensuring the Foundation operated within regulations. Ryan's sister visited one afternoon and found him covered in grease, assembling a pressure valve. You look happy, she said, surprised. I am happy. Exhausted, terrified I'll fail, but happy. Dad would be proud. I hope so. His daughter came with his sister, curious about the warehouse she'd heard so much about. Ryan showed her the workshop, his father's photographs, the tools passed down through generations. Your grandpa built things to help people, Ryan explained. Now I'm trying to finish what he started. Sophie picked up a wrench from the workbench, testing its weight. Can I help? Ryan smiled. Absolutely. He taught her to organize hardware, bolts, washers, nuts, by size and type. Simple work, but she approached it with careful attention. His father's precision passed through Ryan, now touching another generation. 4 weeks in, the first complete system was assembled. Ryan and Bernard spent 3 days testing it, running water through repeatedly, checking for leaks, verifying flow rates, measuring salt removal efficiency. Every test passed. The system worked exactly as his father had designed it, but working in a warehouse wasn't the same as working in a remote coastal village. Ryan built a second system, then a third, documenting every step, creating assembly instructions clear enough for anyone with basic tools to follow. His father's notes had been technical, precise, but inaccessible. Ryan translated them into plain language, added diagrams, anticipated common mistakes. The night before the final board meeting, Ryan sat alone in the workshop. Around him, 3 completed desalination systems stood ready for shipping. Documentation was prepared. Training materials were finished. Everything was ready. He opened his father's master journal one more time, reading the entries he'd nearly memorized. His father's doubts, his father's determination, his father's hope that someday this work would matter. "I'm doing it, Dad," Ryan said to the empty room. "It's happening." The board meeting the next morning was brief. Patricia presented the logistics plan. Bernard reviewed the technical specifications. Kenneth outlined the legal framework. And Ryan stood before the 3 board members with his father's blueprint in hand. "This is my father's life's work," he said. "The Clean Water Initiative exists to ensure that work reaches the people he intended it for, communities that need clean water but can't afford conventional solutions. Our first installation is scheduled for 3 weeks from today. If successful, Clearwater Solutions will fund 10 more installations over the next year." Bernard raised his hand. "What happens if it fails?" Ryan met his eyes. "Then we learn from the failure and try again. My father's mistake wasn't that his designs failed. They never did. His mistake was being too afraid of failure to let them be tested. We won't make that mistake." The vote was unanimous. The Clean Water Initiative was operational. That evening, Ryan received an email from Clearwater Solutions with travel arrangements. He'd be accompanying the first system to installation, helping train local technicians, ensuring everything worked properly. He'd be leaving in 2 weeks. He stood in the warehouse doorway, watching the sun set over the town, and felt his father's presence like a hand on his shoulder. Not haunting, not demanding, just present. Proud, maybe, or maybe just at peace that the work would continue. Ryan locked the warehouse and drove home, his father's tool belt on the seat beside him, ready for whatever came next. The coastal village was smaller than Ryan had imagined. 30 families clustered along a rocky shoreline where the Pacific crashed against black volcanic stones. The nearest freshwater source was a contaminated stream 3 miles inland, and the ocean stretched endlessly before them, salt water they couldn't drink surrounding them on all sides. Ryan arrived with Bernard and 2 technicians from Clearwater Solutions. The desalination system, carefully packed in crates, came by truck over roads that barely deserved the name. The village elder, a woman named Rosa with weathered hands and kind eyes, greeted them with cautious hope. "Many have promised help," she said in careful English. "Few deliver." "We'll deliver," Ryan promised, though his stomach churned with doubt. Everything depended on the next 3 days. They assembled the system in the village center, where everyone could watch. Ryan had rehearsed this moment countless times in the warehouse. But doing it here, with real people depending on the outcome, felt entirely different. Bernard handled the technical supervision while Ryan worked with his hands, connecting components exactly as his father's blueprint specified. The villagers gathered in a circle, children sitting cross-legged in the dust, adults standing with arms crossed, expressions mixing skepticism with desperate hope. The housing went up first, a sturdy frame that could withstand coastal weather. Then the filtration membranes, precision-engineered to remove salt while allowing water molecules through. The pressure system that made it all work without requiring electricity. Every piece clicked into place like his father had known it would. "Your father designed this?" Rosa asked, watching Ryan work 20 years ago. "He never got to see it installed. He would be proud of you." Ryan's hands trembled slightly as he tightened the final connection. "I hope so." By sunset, the system was assembled. They'd run the intake line down to the ocean, positioned above the tide line, but below the high water mark. The output would flow into a storage tank the village had prepared, 500 gallons of capacity, enough for the entire community's daily needs. But assembled wasn't the same as working. That test would come tomorrow. Ryan barely slept that night. He lay in the simple guest room Rosa had provided, listening to the ocean's endless rhythm, imagining everything that could go wrong. Leaks, pressure failures, membrane tears. 1,000 ways the system could fail, and every failure would prove he wasn't capable of continuing his father's work. At dawn, the entire village gathered around the system. Ryan checked every connection one final time. Bernard reviewed the pressure gauges. The Clearwater technicians verified their monitoring equipment was recording properly. "Ready?" Bernard asked. Ryan nodded, though ready was the last thing he felt. He opened the intake valve. Ocean water began flowing into the first chamber, visible through the clear housing his father had designed for diagnostic purposes. The salt water was murky, filled with particles and minerals. It flowed through the first filtration stage, then into the membrane system, where the real magic happened. The pressure gauge climbed, 50 psi, 75, 100, right where it should be. The membranes were working, separating water molecules from salt ions, forcing pure water through microscopic channels, while concentrating brine flowed back to the ocean. Minutes passed. The crowd was silent, watching clear tubes that should have shown water but remained empty. Ryan's chest tightened. Had he miscalculated the flow rate? Had a membrane failed? Then a single drop appeared in the output tube, then another. Then a steady stream of crystal-clear water flowing into the collection container. One of the children gasped. An older man crossed himself. Rosa stepped forward and held out a cup. Ryan filled it with the output water, clean, clear, pure. She drank deeply, then smiled. "It works," she said simply. The crowd erupted. Children danced. Adults embraced. Someone started singing. Ryan stood there, wrench still in his hand, watching his father's design do exactly what it was supposed to do after 20 years of waiting. Bernard clapped him on the shoulder. "Your father was a genius." "I know," Ryan said, his voice breaking. "I know." They spent the rest of the day training village members on system maintenance, how to check pressure, clean filters, monitor flow rates. Ryan had simplified his father's technical notes into a manual anyone could follow, with illustrations and step-by-step instructions. By evening, 3 village members could operate and maintain the system independently. The water flowed continuously, filling the storage tank, providing for every family. Children who'd spent their lives drinking contaminated stream water now had access to clean water from the ocean itself. Rosa found Ryan sitting alone near the system as the sun set. "Watching it work, you gave us more than water," she said. "You gave us hope. My father gave it to you. I just delivered it. Your father dreamed it. You made it real. There's a difference." She sat beside him. He would be very proud. Ryan thought about his father working alone in that warehouse, designing this system, testing it endlessly, too afraid to let it touch the world. And now here it was, doing exactly what his father had intended, helping people who needed it most. Thank you," Ryan whispered to his father's memory. "Thank you for believing someone would finish this." The ocean crashed against the rocks, and the system hummed quietly, turning salt water into life. Ryan returned home to find the warehouse transformed by possibility. News of the successful installation had spread quickly through engineering networks and humanitarian circles. His email inbox overflowed with inquiries, communities requesting systems, organizations offering partnership, engineers wanting to volunteer. Kenneth had fielded dozens of calls. Clearwater Solutions wants to accelerate the timeline. Instead of 10 installations over a year, they're proposing 20 over 6 months. The demand is overwhelming. Ryan stood in his father's workshop, looking at the photographs pinned to the corkboard. His father's face, younger and hopeful in those early pictures, seemed to be watching him, waiting to see what Ryan would do with this moment. "Can we handle that pace?" Ryan asked. "With proper organization and funding, yes. Clearwater is increasing their licensing payment. The foundation will have real resources now." Kenneth paused. Your father spent 20 years protecting this work from the world. In 3 months, you've shared it with the world. That's the difference. Over the next weeks, Ryan trained additional teams. The warehouse became a teaching center where volunteers learned to assemble, install, and maintain the systems. Bernard led the technical training while Patricia coordinated logistics with receiving communities. The second installation went to a drought-stricken town in East Africa. The third to an island community in Southeast Asia. Each one worked perfectly. Each one changed lives. Each one proved that his father's designs were as revolutionary as the blueprints had promised. Ryan documented everything, not just the successes, but the challenges. A pressure valve that needed redesigning for extreme heat. Filter membranes that required more frequent cleaning in areas with heavy sediment. He improved his father's designs where necessary, making them more robust, more adaptable to different conditions. His father had created the blueprint. Ryan was making it practical. One evening, his mother visited the warehouse. She hadn't been back since that first emotional tour. Now she walked through slowly, seeing the activity. Volunteers assembling systems, Bernard teaching a class on membrane maintenance, Patricia on a video call with a community in Central America. He never imagined this, she said quietly. Michael worked alone because he couldn't imagine trusting anyone enough to collaborate. He trusted Kenneth. One person. And barely. But you've built something bigger than any one person could. She touched one of the completed systems waiting for shipment. You succeeded where he couldn't because you're not afraid of people the way he was. I'm afraid all the time, Ryan admitted. I'm afraid I'll fail, that the systems won't work, that I'm not smart enough or skilled enough. But you do it anyway. That's courage. Your father had genius, but not courage. She turned to face him. I'm proud of you, Ryan. I should have said that sooner. The words hit harder than Ryan expected. He'd spent so much energy trying to make his father proud, he'd forgotten to wonder if he'd made his mother proud. Thank you, Mom. She pulled an envelope from her purse. I found this in storage. One more letter your father sent that I never gave you. I think you're ready for it now. Ryan opened it carefully. The letter was dated just after he was born. Dear Ryan, you're 3 days old, and I'm sitting in the hospital cafeteria trying to write down everything I feel. You're perfect. Absolutely perfect. I'm terrified I'll fail you. I'm terrified I'll be the kind of father who's too focused on work to be present. But I promise you this. Everything I build, every problem I solve, every design I perfect, it's all for you. Not to leave you, but to leave you something that matters. I hope someday you'll understand. I hope someday you'll forgive me for the mistakes I'm going to make. All my love, Dad. Ryan folded the letter carefully and placed it in his pocket next to the other letters he carried. His father had known, even then, that he'd fail at balancing work and family. But he'd loved Ryan anyway, tried anyway, hoped anyway. He did the best he could, his mother said. So did I. We both failed you in different ways. You both gave me what I needed, Ryan replied, just not in the ways any of us expected. 6 months after that first installation, the Clean Water Initiative had provided systems to 18 communities across 4 continents. Nearly 10,000 people had access to clean water who hadn't before. The foundation had a permanent staff of 5, a network of trained volunteers, and partnerships with 3 ethical manufacturers. Ryan stood in the warehouse one evening after everyone had left, looking at the map on the wall, marked with pins showing every installation. Each pin represented families, children, futures changed by his father's work and Ryan's willingness to share it. His phone rang. His sister, Sophie, wants to know if she can help at the warehouse this weekend. She's been telling everyone at school about Grandpa's inventions. Ryan smiled. Tell her yes. There's always room for one more. He thought about his father working alone, dying alone, never seeing the impact of his genius. And he thought about himself, surrounded by people committed to the same mission, building something that would outlast all of them. His father had given him the tools. Ryan had learned to use them not alone, but together with others who believed the work mattered. That made all the difference. 1 year after buying the warehouse for $30, Ryan stood before a small gathering in the workshop. They'd come to dedicate a memorial plaque, simple brass, mounted beside his father's drafting table. In memory of Michael Thorne, it read. Engineer, inventor, dreamer, his designs changed the world. His son made sure the world knew. Kenneth spoke first, his voice steady despite the emotion. Michael was my closest friend for 15 years. I watched him struggle with impossible choices, sacrifice things he loved for principles he believed in. He wasn't perfect, but he was genuine. This foundation, this work continuing, it's what he always hoped for but never believed possible. Patricia shared how Michael had installed a filtration system at her shelter years ago, refusing payment, saying helping was reward enough. Bernard talked about consulting sessions where Michael's brilliance was matched only by his humility. Ryan's mother stood and surprised everyone by speaking. I was married to Michael for 8 years. I loved him and I resented him, sometimes in the same moment. He chose his work over his family, and that hurt deeply. But standing here, seeing what that work has become, I understand him better. He wasn't choosing work over love. He was trying to show love through work. I wish I'd understood that when it mattered. I wish he'd lived to see this. Then Ryan stepped forward, his daughter Sophie beside him. My father and I missed each other's lives. I was 7 when he left, 27 when he died. But he left me something more valuable than time together. He left me purpose. He showed me that what you build matters more than what you own, that helping others is the highest form of success. Sophie looked up at him, then at the workshop around them. Grandpa sounds like he was really smart. He was, Ryan said, and really stubborn, and really kind, just like you're going to be. After the ceremony, people lingered, examining the preserved workshop, asking questions about the designs, sharing stories of communities transformed by the systems. The warehouse had become both memorial and mission headquarters, honoring the past while building the future. That evening, after everyone left, Ryan sat alone in his father's chair. The workshop looked exactly as his father had left it, except for one addition, Ryan's own workbench beside his father's. Tools arranged with the same care, notebooks documenting improvements and innovations. He opened his journal and wrote, Year 1 complete. 23 installations. 15,000 people with access to clean water. 3 patents licensed. Foundation financially stable. Sophie learning to use tools. Mom visits weekly. Kenneth healthy and sharp. Dad, if you're somehow aware of this, I hope you're proud. I hope you know your work mattered. I hope you've forgiven yourself for the mistakes, because I've forgiven you. I understand now that you did the best you could with who you were. I'm trying to do the same. He closed the journal and looked at the photograph of his father holding him as an infant. That moment of pure love, captured and preserved, had waited 37 years to be understood. Ryan took the photo down and placed it on his own workbench, beside a new photograph. Himself and Sophie in the warehouse, her small hands holding a wrench, his hands guiding hers, generations connected through tools and purpose. Ryan's phone buzzed. A message from Rosa, the village elder from the first installation. System working perfectly. Children healthy. Women no longer walking 3 miles for water. You gave us our lives back. Thank you. He showed the message to the empty workshop, to his father's memory, to the designs that had waited so long to serve their purpose. We did it, Dad, he said quietly. Together across time we did it. Ryan locked the workshop and walked through the main warehouse. Maps covered one wall now, showing installations complete and planned. Photographs of smiling families with access to clean water. Letters of gratitude in a dozen languages. Evidence that one man's quiet genius, combined with another man's courage to share it, could actually change the world. Outside, the evening sun painted the warehouse's blue panels in shades of gold and amber. The building that had seemed abandoned and worthless now hummed with purpose. Ryan had bought it for $30 and found something priceless inside, not just inventions and patents, but connection to a father he'd never really known, and a mission that gave his life meaning. He drove home, thinking about the future. More installations planned. Training programs expanding. His daughter learning the family trade. His mother finally at peace with the past. Kenneth mentoring the next generation of engineers. The work continuing, growing, touching more lives. Some inheritances are measured in money, others in property or possessions. But the greatest inheritances are measured in purpose passed from one generation to the next, in work that outlives the workers, in love expressed through service to others. Ryan had inherited his father's hands, his father's tools, and his father's dream. He'd added his own courage, his own community, his own improvements. Together, they'd built something neither could have built alone. That night, Ryan tucked Sophie into bed, and she asked him about her grandfather. "Tell me again about the warehouse," she said. "About finding Grandpa's workshop." Ryan smiled and began the story about a $30 auction, a hidden room, and the moment everything changed. He told it the way his father might have wanted it told, not as a story of loss and regret, but as a story of hope and redemption, because in the end, that's what it was. His father had dreamed. Ryan had delivered, and the work would continue long after both of them were gone. Some legacies are inherited. The best ones are earned, honored, and then passed forward with love.